The electronic drum sound alright? Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Nice. Back in here. I think we're good, man. I think so too. Awesome.
Cool. So I just can move the keyboard over?
Oh yeah. You will strike.
I'm gonna look at you.
I feel like that thing's tough. I'm not gonna lie. It's right. It's right in my business. I understand it's necessary, but it's just right.
If we're gonna sit down and write the Great Mormon novel, for outsiders, to appeal to outsiders, it needs to explain and it needs to illustrate both what makes us different as Mormons and what we share in common with everybody else that's relatable for them.
I think that we have lived in a perpetual state of insecurity, a kind of inferiority complex that makes us want to reassure ourselves in the world that we're just like the rest of the Christians.
Anybody is capable of anything. And I think that Mormons are anybody.
Orson F. Whitney said, we will yet have Miltons and Shakespeares of our own. So, I mean, this Slate article talks about how perhaps a great Mormon novelist can't happen. The culture is just not wired to produce one. Looking at the traits of Mormonism that maybe inhibit art or push our art in certain directions, and one of those could be, you know, I thought he was a little bit harsh on us. He says lack of curiosity, but we're sometimes accused of a lack of intellectual rigor, which he pokes holes in but doesn't completely disprove. And so my post was kind of a response to that, that no, there are lots of really intelligent Mormons actually. Our culture tends to breed a certain type of really intelligent person. We breed scientists and CEOs and business owners, but not necessarily writers and lyricists and poets.
So we have this grand cosmological view of existence, and then you look at Mormon art and it's shallow and it's safe. And this to me is really sad, because I look at what Mormonism has to offer as a religion and as a worldview, and it's just amazing to me. And we're not taking advantage of that. We're making movies that play jokes about green jello and singles wards and things like that. Psychologists have done a lot of studies about creativity and what opens up the door for creativity in individuals.
There's a ton of art, specifically music, that comes out of pain, that comes out of suffering and sorrow, and drugs and those different kind of things.
Great art tends to be made by people with certain characteristics. Those characteristics are, you know, narcissism, authority issues, pessimism, existential dread. Mormonism is a culture that looks down on narcissism, looks down on pride and on self and things like that.
That's limiting to think that it only comes out of that. I mean, there are so many songs that come out of joy and experience in life.
For me, being creative is something that I feel like I need. It's an outlet that I want in my life. Always, you know, there's no desire to be famous, but there's desire to always be creative.
I'm glad that people think that LDS life is so peachy.
It's perfect,
and it is. I mean, it's great, but everyone goes through stuff, no matter what.
No one's perfect, and no one's life is perfect. So I mean, there's no way that you're not going to have creative situations or you know, situations that spark creative ideas.
I think that lessons can be learned from pain and trials, but you can also learn lessons from a really joyful experience. You can learn that same lesson.
You have to be real. You have to really be able to express life in its both its best and its worst ways in order to be a great artist. And so a Mormon can do that, a non-Mormon can do that. I don't know if it makes that much a difference.
Everybody has their demons, you know. Everybody has something they can fall back on to paint something either emotional or abstract, dark, gloomy. I don't feel like the things I've learned from the church have kept me from feeling pain and feeling adversity.
You don't have to have a broken home. You don't have to have horrible life experiences to be creative. Sure, it can help give you things to write about, but every human, no matter what you believe or what upbringing you came from, is going to have experiences that are gonna spark creative ideas.
Everyone's had their heart broken in their life,
sure.
Mormon or not. You can write a good song about that.
We do grow up in happy families, but within happy families, there are struggles. I don't feel like being Mormon keeps me from painting the things that I find are valuable. The things that inhibit us to paint aren't worth painting. They're not worth portraying on a canvas with a pencil, with a paintbrush.
There's a real connection between taking risks and being creative. And the problem in Mormon culture is we're not really taught to be risk takers. So I'm not talking about people living risky or dangerous lives. I think you can have a quite safe and normal and healthy life and have art that pushes boundaries and is creative and is fresh and real.
Being LDS doesn't inhibit your creativity. Allowing the culture to stifle you inhibits your creativity.
I think that Mormons in general have the capacity to be creative, but I don't think that they would ever support or try to immortalize by celebrity status somebody whose works of art are controversial.
Our lives reflect and are representative of the church because we are lights unto the world. We have to represent the church, and people look to us as an example, and we are a peculiar people. And I really think that art is supposed to push boundaries.
Rock and roll, it has a basis in rebellion, and art is built to push boundaries. And religion is built to enforce boundaries. And we learn from a very early age that, you know, we have boundaries and we have inhibitions, and our inhibitions are good because they keep us from making bad decisions. And when you drink alcohol, your inhibitions are lowered and you start making bad decisions.
And so if you push boundaries, then since the church doesn't push boundaries, then you are not representing the church. And that is something that I think people get to come to terms with on their own and decide which boundaries to push and which boundaries to leave alone.
It's easier to feel a kind of creative freedom and license because I'm not aware of a kind of prevailing cultural orthodoxy in which I am immersed. I don't feel the shadow of the church office building looming in the background when I'm writing, so I feel perfectly free.
Rock and roll and art is all about breaking down your inhibitions because they're keeping you from really expressing who the real you deep down inside is. I reject that worldview. I don't think that's right. But there's a certain amount of truth to it. You know, does faith, hope, and charity and love even let us look at life in a way that non-Mormons would consider authentic?
Does Mormonism stunt the ability to be creative? I don't think so.
There are so many things about the culture that I thought inhibited me and stifled me. And it's because I allowed my perception of what they thought was acceptable to be my own reality.
We spend a lot of time looking at each other and judging each other and not giving each other a little wiggle room to try new things.
It is part of Mormon culture to have a different set of goals from perhaps a lot of other cultures or these subcultures just in this country. And a lot of people, their goal is to just have a family and have a stable job, and for them that's being happy and that's what they want.
Certainly I do. You know, I'm not going to drop everything and go on a tour with my band. We could have, but you know, I have a wife that is at home, and now I have a kid that I kind of want to be with. And so those things just take priority.
Maybe there is something to a culture of you know, happy family settings that kind of does diminish this drive to be artists. And I mean, I have no way of backing that up. That's just my opinion.
So I think God is waiting on us, and we are the ones who are holding ourselves back. And I don't think the official church is holding us back in any way.
He's an individual, I'm an individual, and we all belong to one great stew of people, and all the people are grouped together into this one pot called Mormon stew, and all these people tend to be classified by one single picture, and I don't think that's right.
I am the person that determines my level of success. If you allow other people to determine that, then you are giving control of the path of your life to somebody else. And that is not in alignment with God's will. Never in the scriptures does it say anything about allowing somebody else to dictate that.
The only thing that would stop an individual from achieving what he wants is the individual himself.
I feel that there are members of the church who are artists, such as performers, you know, actors, painters, and so forth, that are given the call to go outside of the church and display their work, even if it's not religious, even if it has nothing to do with Mormonism. There is a certain quality that a member of the church can carry along with their presentation that can spark someone's interest, and through their countenance and their artwork, people notice that.
I consider Ryan to be a brilliant artist, but he expresses himself in a way completely different than I do, and I mean, we're both Mormon cultured, right? But we have our own culture too that we bring to that.
There's more to overcome, culturally and artistically, and you can find the balance between pushing boundaries and, like I say, being in alignment. You can find that balance, and you can create whatever you want to create. I realized that I could choose to be an artist and be a musician, and that even though that didn't fit into what the culture's idea of normalcy was, that it also didn't conflict with the culture and the dogma as far as an acceptable means of making a living and of living my life and being a child of God.
Our parents are really positive and like encourage us to do what we love and stuff. So I think the gospel kind of helped us in that aspect where things are positive, and so, you know, go shoot for your goals and stuff. And then with writing, it comes out, and, you know, I'm not gonna cuss my life away in my songs.
I wouldn't concede necessarily that we don't have a great number of Mormon authors and artists. I think short fiction is an area where we excel. Science fiction is another area where we have superb writers. There was a great era of novel writing back, you know, called the Lost Generation, where people like Marjorie Whipple and Virginia Sorensen were writing books that achieved national acclaim and recognition. So I think that we can be a little too hard on ourselves. We're still proportionally a very small minority of those who are engaged in the creative arts.
It's just such a smaller group of people than the whole rest of the world. So I mean, it's like to have bands that are Mormon faith. I mean, I think that's great, because to just have a couple in the music industry, you know, big in the music industry, that's a pretty good representation since there's so many people in the world.
There aren't a ton of them, but there aren't a ton of Mormons like in the world. There's 13 million. That's not very much.
I guess you have to walk a fine line, because we're performers and we're trying to please an audience, and you also want to express yourself.
If you're going to write a book that's truly about the Mormon experience, it's going to show that there are some peculiarities, big peculiarities in our culture. And I think we would probably prefer not to have the most interesting parts of our culture exposed to criticism and exposed to people making value judgments about us, I would say.
And there may be pragmatic reasons for doing that I don't discount. Certainly you don't want people to feel that you are so weird, in President Hinckley's terminology, that they're not interested in our message. But at the same time, we have to, I think, recognize that people are looking for an alternative.
We are agents unto ourselves. Like, everything about that is our individual choices determine our individual outcomes and success. That's what the whole agency part of the plan is.
Certainly experiences that I've had because of my faith have played into a lot of things that I've written. Being a missionary for the LDS Church, I mean, certainly it was a huge part of my life, and so that part of my life is expressed in certain songs, if not all of them.
I had this realization that whatever I want to do, as long as it is in alignment with God's will, that I can do that. And that being a musician isn't out of alignment with that. Being an artist, being an author, being a famous photographer or writer or whatever, like all these different things, they're not out of alignment with God's will. And so sometimes the lifestyle that we associate with these kind of things, the lifestyle is out of alignment. But there is a way to do those things and not live the rock lifestyle with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like, those don't have to be a part of it.
When you look at popular music, Katy Perry sings almost exclusively about having sex with people. And so how do we deal with that as a Mormon community, that we're trying to break into these industries and at the same time we're not addressing the things that they're talking about in those industries? You know, you have to pull from your experiences, and our life experiences are so kind of unique that they lead us in different places, I think.
It's because the world likes brazen hussies, and we're not going to be them.
As far as what you yourself can achieve in what you create, there's no limit to the quality that you can put out. And so it doesn't matter if you're Mormon or not. I mean, being Mormon would only end up being an excuse then.
I mean, it's just a tough industry. I don't think it has to do with being Mormon. I don't think it has to do with being any religion at all. I think it just has to do with the kind of music you make, or
luck,
who you know, luck.
Maybe Mormons are just historically unlucky. Maybe God doesn't want us to be rock stars. I'm serious. Maybe, you know, like, with all the things that have to go right to get a top 10 record, maybe our Father in heaven is just like, you know what? I don't want you guys in that position. And that's fine too.
But you can be at the top of whatever field you're going to be. If you find that the lifestyle that accompanies that doesn't correlate with what you should be doing as far as in alignment with the doctrine, then make different choices.
Faithfulness in the church is not antithetical to doing good art. In fact, it may be that understanding our doctrine and our worldview will help us to have more creative and original art. Understanding the importance of being empathetic and suffering with those who suffer will help us to have better art.
Yes, Mormons can create good art. There are a ton of Mormons who are doing good stuff. There are a ton of Mormons who are doing eh.
I think there's a lot of hope for the future.
We always want to segment things into us and them. If a Mormon writes a book we don't agree with, it's really easy to say, you represent the church, young lady. And Jesus doesn't approve of what you wrote, and I don't think your book represents me. And I'm saying, let's get rid of all that and say, look, if you're baptized and you believe this stuff, you are a Mormon, and you can, you know, maybe I don't agree with what you wrote in your book.
I really think that there's no us and them We seriously, we are all God's children.
I think the next Mormon novelist right now is probably reading Stephanie Meyer's in high school, and she's going to get to BYU and she's going to want to be a brilliant writer. She'll get to college and be exposed to all these amazing writers and realize that there's more to literature than vampires. And the girls that are reading Twilight and the boys that are reading Ender's Game are going to grow up and they're going to make amazing novels. Let's tell ourselves that.
I think there's great things coming for a bunch of bands that we've played with and
Utah, which is obviously a place where there's a lot of Mormons, is definitely catching on in the music scene. Like everyone thinks that you have to go to LA or New York or Austin or Nashville, but Utah's catching on, and there's a lot of big things happening there. People are coming to see local acts because they're getting a lot of buzz, and I think that some really big things are happening in the music industry in that community for sure.
The skeptic in me says probably not, partially just for the state of art as a whole in the world, not Mormon culture, but just artist culture in general. We don't have Shakespeare's and Milton's anymore.
That's true.
So in that sense, I'd say no. And as far as great musicians, there's not really that many great musicians out there.
That's very true.
The globalized, commercialized art industry has kind of consumed everything. And so I would hope so. I really do. And I would hope that in general, our entire society move back to really appreciating great literature and great music. And that would open up, I think, for Mormon artists along with everybody. But I really don't know.
The question is, when a Mormon Shakespeare pops up, are we going to accept him? Or are we going to, judge him or her to the extent that we drive them away or give them new conflicts to write about?
Of course there's a future. Of course things are only getting better. The more that we expand globally, the more that we expand membership-wise, it only gets, the pot to draw from only gets bigger, and the opportunities only become bigger. And when people decide to allow themselves to break out of that cultural stifling and break out of creative mediocrity and find the balance between the doctrine and the culture, find the balance between pushing boundaries and being in alignment and still allowing themselves to be free, to be creative, I think that, man, we're just taking it to the top.